this cake design to you. So in the movie Red Shoes, there's an evil witch who uses a magic apple tree to try to create a pair of magic red shoes that will keep her beautiful and young forever. So there's a specific scene where the witch is holding out the apple to Snow White, and this cake design is inspired by that moment. Rather than an animated take on this scene, I'm going for a more realistic take on the apple in the hand. That's because really that's what I do best, realism. So it's time to paint the apple. There are a ton of different shades of red in this apple with a little bit of a greenish yellow in there. So I've decided to hand paint the colors in layers. Here I'm laying down the first layer of color, then I let it dry, and then I add the second layer, and then finally a third layer. When I look up close at a real apple, I see a bunch of vertical lines, so I'm mimicking these lines by painting my brush strokes vertically. Most of the time when I'm painting hyper-realistic food cakes, I have to blend and hide those brush strokes. But with this apple cake, I get to let them show, and they really do read as the real outside of an apple. It's a nice change of pace. You can see that I'm changing the tone of the red with every layer of color I add. So there's light reds, there's medium reds, and then there's these deep brownish reds. I'm also switching up my brushes quite a bit, and that's gonna help add variety to the lines I make. The real apple has these super tiny light specks on it, which I really like, so I'm painting those in very carefully with a super fine brush. So the focal point is the cake apple, and there's a chocolate hand that holds the apple. So now I'm adding an armature to support the thumb, the pinky, and the palm of the hand. The good news is, if I play my cards right, I can use the actual apple cake as a support for the other three fingers. If this cake were made for a customer, I would explain to them that the apple and everything touching the apple is fully edible. And you want to think of the rest of the hand more as a cake topper because there's a support structure inside that's not for eating. So now I'm bulking up the hand with modeling chocolate. This cake design is super tricky. You can see that I hid that rod that holds the apple up inside the chocolate hand. I wasn't even 100% sure that this was going to line up properly, but it did. Whew. It really does look completely hidden. Now that I have the basic shape of the hand, it's time to start sculpting in the details. So I'm actually using my own hand and wrist as a model for this cake. It helps me see where there's folds and wrinkles, and it's just really helpful to have a live, real hand in front of me. For the three remaining fingers, I'm rolling out modeling chocolate coils, and I'm securing them to the apple and to the knuckles of the hand. It's looking a bit like a glove right now, so to fix that, I'm sculpting fine creases, some skin texture, and nails. I'm adding a chunk of softened modeling chocolate to the back of the hand, and then I'm adding some metacarpals. You know, the bones in the back of your hand that you can like slightly see pop out when you move your fingers around. The back of the hand is actually my favorite part of this cake. So to create the sleeve, all I have to do is score lines in the shape of that sleeve right into the chocolate. It creates a separation without adding an extra layer. And back to painting. So I painted the apple first because I knew trying to paint around those fingers was gonna be like super difficult. So I thought ahead, for once. So now I just need to focus on painting the hand. There are a bunch of different colors in all skin tones. You're gonna see warm colors like reds and oranges, but then you're also gonna see cool colors like some blues and purples. I use them all. So I started with more of a yellow, and then I added in some red areas, focusing on getting the color into those creases of the hand to make them really pop. Then I wipe away some of the color and I add some lighter areas. This is white mixed with a super small amount of purple. If I look at my hand from a distance, I see one color. But when I look up close at my hand, I can see that the color is pretty uneven and somewhat splotchy. So I recreate that in my chocolate hand by painting random lines that are wavy and kind of squiggly, and I immediately soften the color with a clean, dry brush. I even added a few veins in the back of the hand, but I kept them extremely subtle. You wouldn't want to be able to see them clearly unless you get up close. And again, you can see that the color I'm adding is constantly changing. Sometimes it's a bit of a greenish blue and then sometimes a golden yellow. I'm all over the place, but it works. To add some highlights to the knuckles and the metacarpals, I wiped away some of the color with a clean, wet paper towel. I really love this effect. It really helps to show that there's some tension on the skin. Like, this hand isn't just relaxed, it's holding something. It's holding an apple. Then I added a few more subtle veins and the skin is done. The stem of this apple is made of rolled out fondant that I let dry overnight. So fondant dries nice and firm, so I'm able to feed it into the cake like a toothpick. Now I'm carefully painting the sleeve brown. So I'm making sure to get the color super close to the skin without accidentally hitting it. And now if I do, it isn't a super hard fix, but if I can avoid it, then even better. Look at those nails. I wish I could have pretty nails, but I keep them super short because I sculpt pretty much every day. They get in the way. I keep them nice and nubby. But this witch's nails, they are beautifully manicured. It really felt like I was painting a real human's nails. And finally, the very last detail of this cake is to add a layer of clear, shiny piping gel onto the nails to make them shiny. It's the final edible top coat. And there you have it, a realistic cake take on a scene from Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs. This cake was so fun to make, and the movie that inspired it is just as fun. Don't forget, you can watch Red Shoes right now anywhere you buy or rent movies, or on Apple TV. Apple, the most suspicious of fruits. And now my favorite part, let's cut the cake. Oops, I got your finger. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, subscribe now because I put out a new cake video like this one every week. Natalie Sideserf here of Sideserf Cake Studio, and I'm gonna show you how I made a Baby Yoda cake. I don't know if you've noticed this, but Baby Yoda looks a lot like Gizmo. If you like this Baby Yoda cake video, and you like cakes in general, you should subscribe to our channel because we put out a new cake video every Monday. And if you want to check out what we're doing behind the scenes, you can go to patreon.com/sideserfcakes and become a patron. So let's get started. I started out with 4 5-inch round layers of vanilla cake, and I'm stacking those layers. In between each layer is a layer of vanilla buttercream. Once my 4 layers are stacked, I add 2 more additional layers, but these are going to be 4 inches in diameter. So they're slightly smaller, and those are going to be the head.
Next, I place a bamboo skewer through the center of the cake, and this is something that I'm going to be able to hold on to while I'm carving and icing the cake. All I did was trim a little bit of the chin area, and I rounded out the top of the head. Here I'm adding a crumb coat of icing. I'm just going to make sure that the entire cake is covered in a thin layer of buttercream. This is where that bamboo skewer really comes in handy, because I'm able to hold onto it with my left hand while I ice the cake with my right hand. Next, you want to pop it in the fridge. You're going to take it back out, and we are going to cover it in a layer of modeling chocolate. So I started out with a layer of ivory modeling chocolate to cover the body. I took a blade and trimmed away the excess chocolate, and then you just put some gloves on and you can just blend in those seams really easily. If I didn't have gloves on, I wouldn't be able to smooth out the chocolate as easily. So it's great to have a pair of gloves on hand when you're working with modeling chocolate. Next comes a layer of light green, and that is going to cover the top area of cake. This is going to be his head and his face. I pinch the back, and then I trim away the excess chocolate and blend it in. Then I go around with a blade and I cut off the excess skirt. This looks ridiculous, right? So this is the stuff that I'm going to sculpt all the details out of. So it's very, very simplistic at this point, but it's gonna get better, I promise. I placed a stencil of his face up to the cake, and I traced out where the eyes, the nose, and the mouth are gonna be. Then I go in and I start sculpting all the details with the chocolate that I just covered the cake in. So he's got this little itty bitty nose. And before I get into the details, I want to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. So the eyes are the right size, the nose is the right size, and the mouth is the right size. Then I can go in and really work out the details and all the little creases and wrinkles in his face. I'm adding small amounts of modeling chocolate to bulk up some areas of his face. So I added a little bit for his eyebrow and then his cheeks. Then I go in and I sculpt his little mouth and his tiny chin. He's absolutely adorable. Then I map out the other side of his face. I needed to add a little bit more to his brow, right in the center. I have a bunch of reference photos pulled up on my computer that I'm constantly checking to make sure that my cake Baby Yoda looks just like Baby Yoda. Now that the cake is at room temperature and the chocolate has hardened a bit, I can take out that bamboo skewer and the cake will stand on its own. Then I take that bamboo skewer and I place it through his head from one side of his temple to the other. Now this bamboo skewer is going to hold up his ears. Then I take some modeling chocolate and I cover the skewer and I just shape the ear with chocolate. You gotta be careful when you do this because the chocolate can get pretty soft, so you have to try your best to use only the tools, and if it starts to get too soft, give it a break and go back to it after it gets back to room temperature. Modeling chocolate is amazing, but it does take time to get used to using. It's very temperature sensitive, so if it's too warm, it's really hard to sculpt. But if it's too cold, it's just as difficult because you can't blend seams. So you need to get it at room temperature, and it's perfect. Next, I took some of the chocolate out where the eyes were gonna be, and I flattened out that area. You can see here I hand painted some eyes with edible paper. Then I took a half circle of gelatin. I placed that gelatin over top of the edible paper, and that is going to be my eyeball. I opened the eye a little bit with a sculpting tool, and then I placed the gelatin eye into the cake. The eyes are completely edible, and it makes a really cool effect. These eyes almost look like they're glass. Then I take a little bit of extra modeling chocolate and I close up the eye by adding an upper eyelid. You gotta be a little careful when you're doing this because it is gelatin, so you don't wanna touch it or poke it. You gotta be gentle. Next, I'm going to do the same thing for his other eye. I'm adding a gelatin to edible paper and placing it into the cake. Look how cute. I always love adding the eyes to things. If you want me to do a full tutorial on how to make these gelatin eyes, let me know in the comments below because I'd love to do one. But I want to know if you want me to do one. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that you know when we post new cake tutorials. Otherwise, you're never going to see the gelatin eye tutorial. Come on. To sculpt his clothes, I just manipulated the chocolate that's already on the cake. So I didn't have to add any for this part. I'm just going in and I'm pushing the chocolate around to create a collar and some folds in the body. So for the sleeves, I did add a little ball of modeling chocolate. Because it's super small, it didn't need to be made out of cake. So I just sculpt that modeling chocolate into the shape of a sleeve, and then I add 2 green hands. I took a hard bristled brush and added some texture to areas of his clothes. To paint, I added a few little pink areas around his eyes and in his ears, but he's mostly that sort of mint green color. I tried to keep this simple because if the dark areas were too dark, it was gonna age him a bit, and he's just a baby. So I kept those colors nice and soft. To paint his clothes, I just added some ivory and a few different shades of brown food color. And that's it. And there you have it, the most adorable baby Yoda cake. I don't want to do it. I don't want to cut this one. It's usually my favorite part is cutting the cake, but for this cake, it's so adorable that I'm having a really hard time. All right, let's cut it. We're gonna do it. Eat you, I will.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Natalie Sideserf here, Sideserf Cake Studio, and I'm gonna show you how I made a tiki drink cake. Here I have a paper umbrella that I'm going to make an edible version of, starting with the paper. First thing I do is I wet some edible wafer paper, and then I very gently place it onto the real paper umbrella. Now I know that this edible umbrella is going to be insanely fragile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 umbrellas. There's a pink one and a yellow one. That way, when I inevitably break one of them, I have a backup. Once the wafer paper is on, I just use a brush to work it into all those creases. So now I'm gonna set those umbrellas aside to dry, and while I wait, let's start working on the cake. Here I have some cake that I cut into 2.5-inch circles, and I'm stacking them between layers of chocolate ganache. I put a dowel through the top of the cake, which will act as a handle while I ice the outside. And it also keeps the cake from tipping over. Then I apply a layer of chocolate ganache on the outside of the cake, and I smooth it out using a bench scraper or a bendable scraper. Then I cover the cake in a layer of brown modeling chocolate, which tastes a lot like a Tootsie Roll. And then it is on to the fun part. It's time to sculpt. This tiki cup is basically a mix of a bunch of tiki designs that I found online. While I was searching, I found out that there is a whole culture surrounding tiki drinks. Back in 1934, a Texan who went by the name Don the Beachcomber returned home from the Caribbean with a whole new attitude and a brand new idea. So that's when he opened the world's first tiki bar called Don the Beachcomber Cafe in Hollywood. So he is credited with starting the whole tiki culture boom. The fad became super popular in the 1940s and 50s. A lot of it is based around Polynesian art and just a general laid-back island vibe. Usually tiki drinks are made with lighter dark rum, flavored syrups, and fruit juices. And in my experience, they're usually pretty strong. I love them, but I am also not very big, so I gotta take it easy when I have them. The Mai Tai is one of the most famous tiki drinks. The first one was made in Oakland, California, and it got its name when the owner of a bar called Trader Vic's made the drink for some guests that were visiting from Tahiti. They liked the drink so much that they responded with the phrase, Mai Tai Roa A, which I'm sure I pronounced wrong. But in Tahitian, that means very good. Thus, the Mai Tai was born. For me, 2 Mai Tai tikis, and I am not just tipsy. I'm toast. So the cake is sculpted and the wafer paper on the umbrellas is dry, so that means it's time to paint. Before we move on, I just want to take a moment to tell you about this video's sponsor, Squarespace. I'm a cake decorator, not a web designer, so that's why I love Squarespace. Squarespace makes it easy to create beautiful websites quickly and easily. So people like me can spend less time learning to code and more time doing what we love. Templates make it super easy to get the look you want, and the Squarespace members area provides ways for your website to earn more revenue. Squarespace can also help collect donations using popular payment processors like PayPal, Venmo, and Stripe. To get started, head to squarespace.com right now for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/sideserf to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or a domain. I'm starting with the yellow umbrella, and I'm just using watered down food color and a small paintbrush to paint that design. An unexpected bonus about using the real paper umbrella to create my edible umbrella is that I can just trace that floral design that I can see through. So much easier. I did not plan that, but it's gonna save me a lot of time. Once I finish painting, I'll just trim away the excess wafer paper, and then I'll peel away the real umbrella from the edible one. Sculpting the tiki cup is fairly simple. I just get my brush nice and saturated with color, and then I work it into all those marks I see.